EMD, you've probably heard those three little letters, earnest money deposit. What is earnest money and how does it affect you, the seller? So earnest money, it's that monetary proof that a buyer is really serious about buying your home. So earnest money, sometimes it's already been deposited in the escrow account and that's written on the offer, or most times it's due within a certain amount of days after the offer is accepted per the terms of the written contract. So the buyer says how many days. When the earnest money has been received, that money is then documented with a receipt and it is deposited in an escrow account. And that escrow account is usually either with the real estate company, the title company that's handling the buyer's closing, or the real estate company holding the closing. Earnest money, it gives you, the seller, some protection during the time that your property is off market and under contract, because it provides you with some reassurance that the buyer is not just gonna back out for any reason without having a contract contingency, or they won't just walk away in the middle of the night, so to speak. And everything is always specified in the contract. So as I've mentioned before, in a seller's market with so few properties available for sale, and we've got so many buyers that are searching for homes, much like we're experiencing right now, a seller may receive multiple offers on a home. So savvy buyers is what they're doing in many markets, including Central Virginia, is they are increasing that amount of earnest money that they're offering in order to signal to you, the seller, that, hey, I'm very serious about this house. I want this house. In the Central Virginia area, earnest money is usually somewhere between $1,000 to $5,000. Of course, that depends on the purchase price of the property, but the amount of earnest money that is being offered is ultimately up to the negotiation between the buyer and the seller, and y'all coming together to negotiate that amount. So in the past year and a half, we've seen a lot higher earnest money amounts that are being offered from buyers to seller than ever before. So when making an offer, the buyer decides on the initial amount that they're going to offer the seller in earnest money, and they put that on the contract offer. A seller, you can then accept that amount of earnest money that's offered, or you might counter for a higher amount of earnest money if you would like to increase it. At closing, that earnest money, it doesn't just go away. It's been held in escrow, and it's then going to be credited towards the purchase price of what the buyer has to bring. So if the buyer's figures show that the buyer needs to bring $5,000 to closing, and the buyer initially put $1,000 in earnest money deposit into escrow, then the buyer will bring an additional $4,000 to closing to make up that total $5,000. There are some ways that buyers might get their earnest money deposit back. So for example, there are lots of contingencies in the contract that, say a buyer completes the inspections and then they and the sellers can't come to an agreement on which repairs will be made, then the buyer can cancel the contract and receive their earnest money deposit back to them. Okay. It can also happen if the appraised value comes in lower than the purchase price and the seller and the buyer can't come to an agreement on a new purchase price because we've got that appraisal clause in our contract, and the property has to appraise for a value equal to or greater than the purchase price, and a renegotiation, no one can come to terms between the buyer and the seller, then in this case, the buyer would receive their earnest money deposit back as well. So these are some scenarios that may occur when the buyer gets the money back, but that also happens for a seller as well. They may be entitled to keep the earnest money. One example of that would be if, say, the buyer has done all of their inspections per the terms of the contract, but they don't object to the property condition in writing by that deadline that they had put in the contract, and then they walk away after that deadline due to the property condition. At that point, the seller would have to start all over, put the house back on the market, and have to find another buyer. In that case, most likely the seller would end up with the earnest money deposit. So there's lots of different things that can happen in the contract, and I really can't emphasize enough the value of working with an experienced agent that really knows our contract inside and out when selling your home. So find somebody to help guide you every step of the way, an experienced agent. I'm Anita L. Williamson, and I want to set you up for selling success.